Hello and welcome to Banking Transformed, the top podcast in retail banking. I'm your host, Jim Roos, founder and CEO of the Digital Banking Report and co-publisher of the Financial Brand. Personalizing experiences across the entire customer lifecycle has emerged as a critical strategy for engaging customers and driving growth in banking. However, unlike retailers who focus on maximizing immediate transactions, financial institutions face unique challenges in leveraging personalization to build long-term, ongoing, profitable relationships. We are excited to have Olly Downs, Chief Technology and AI Officer at Curinos, join us on the Banking Transformed podcast. Olly will discuss the importance of personalized experiences and engagement in banking and what marketing executives must do now to prepare for the future of hyper-personalization. Olly will also discuss the impact of AI and machine learning on customer engagement and the challenges banks are facing in implementing personalization at speed and at scale. Banks must move beyond traditional bank marketing to create truly personalized, AI-driven experiences that foster deeper customer relationships and engagement. The question becomes, how can financial institutions of all sizes achieve this aspirational goal? So, Olly, before we begin, can you introduce yourself to our audience and share a bit about your background and role at Curinos? Also, it would be great if you could discuss a little bit how Curinos helps financial institutions with their marketing efforts in such an amazing battlefield right now that we're all facing.
Yes, thank you for having me, Jim. I'm Olly Downs. I lead technology and AI at Curinos. I've had a background in enterprise software, data-driven innovation over the last almost 25 years, spanning a number of verticals: telecom, banking, real estate, e-commerce, retail, automotive. I've had the good fortune of being able to ride the waves, at least three of the waves of AI that one might say have occurred over time. It's resulted in 42 US patents. And I founded and co-invented a lot of the technology in Curinos' Amplero product that I know we're going to talk about a little bit today. Speaking broadly about Curinos, we really bring together a unique combination of industry expertise, insights, and analytical capability that really is intended to fuel a strategic and competitive advantage for financial institutions. We have AI-based decisioning tools, predictive analytics, science-based software as a service platforms that are fed by a vast proprietary portfolio of data. And our goal is really to allow our clients to identify emerging opportunities and make informed decisions with those data and those insights that drive sustained performance improvements in their businesses. And we have 85% of the top 100 US banks and credit unions. We have over 800 credit unions and community banks as our customers. And our data assets really span a huge domain: 7 trillion in North American deposit balances, 3 trillion in mortgage originations annually, and 9 billion in US annual marketing spend.
You know, it's interesting in my work with the Curinos and its predecessor company over the years, it's been interesting how the company is really focused on the immediate problems that financial institutions are facing and solutions as to how to get there. I know that we did a podcast recently with one of your team members on generating deposits, because that was a very major thing, certainly at the beginning of the year, but also at the end of last year. You've done this in the loan area, and now you're doing around personalized marketing. And what's interesting is there's not a financial institution that we talk to right now that doesn't talk about the importance of personalized communication and personalized engagement. Yet your research shows that most banks, in fact, less than 25%, say their marketing is personalized. And I would hazard to guess that even that 25% number is relatively high, because how do you define if your marketing is personalized? Is it all personalized? Is part of it personalized? What are the barriers to really doing this in the banking environment right now?
It's an interesting question, Jim, and I think you probably know we call this the personalization bottleneck. And it's really, if you think of the transition over the last 30 or 40 years in banking from truly personalized relationships between a customer and their banker in person in a branch to this proliferation of channels of engagement with the customer, it's put pressure on three major areas: analytics and audience, marketing, creative and creative development, and the ability to experiment. And those three things sort of fitting together in an orchestrated business process that creates a personalized relationship with the customer that now has to span across many more channels than it used to. One of the challenges with this today that we see in most of our banks, large and small, is that the pace on which those three things can come together, analytics and audience, creative, experimentation, it's at best a quarterly cycle. And the challenge with that quarterly cycle is it's about the speed on which the industry and the macro environment is changing. And particularly if you look at the last 2 years, golly, it's changed even faster than that, and perhaps even faster than people were predicting over that period of time. And so to truly create a personalized engagement with a client, it's really pushing on a scale and pace of business process and ability to act with supporting technology that isn't really humanly possible with the teams that most banks have, and the tools that they have across these sort of three key dimensions of the context of a personalized interaction. Right? A personalized interaction is really about three things. It's about speaking to the right person in the right way over the right channel. And we sort of think of that as our three dimensions of context. And you alluded to our study. The things that we sort of learned from the study that we conducted in the first half of the year here around personalization and banking sort of readiness for personalization, there's a very heavy focus on just one of those three dimensions of context, which is really around identifying the right customer and target audience. And that's a very analytics heavy part of the process. And most of the banks we spoke to, over half of them said they had backlogs on two of the key dimensions, that data and analytics, identifying the customer, and then on channel and channel orchestration. And particularly, we talked about this sort of, now we're talking about many channels through which you engage the customer, putting those together in the right way and making sure you can orchestrate them in a way that makes sense and doesn't create discordant customer experiences, very challenging. And then also, it's hard to make a transition from batch campaigns. I have a new product proposition, or I have a new product rates and pricing, and I'm going to communicate those in batches and waves to, I really need an ongoing dialogue with the customer that's always on, which again puts pressure on these dimensions of business process and orchestration.
It's interesting because as consumers, we're being inundated with more and more advanced abilities to communicate and on a personalized level. I brought up quite a few times recently on the podcast that my Hulu TV, I realize, listens to me on a regular basis. And I ask a question to my wife about, geez, I can't remember the Jeep dealer I went to the last time. And immediately a commercial comes up for one of the Jeep dealers in the area. And immediately after that, another Jeep dealer's commercial comes in. That isn't by chance. We also are spoiled, I think, in the way that Amazon communicates with us. But these are spotty incidences of personalization, and in your studies, you've talked about how personalization really differs in banking versus what it does in retail. Why is this distinction important? Why is it that we don't realize that we have to rise to a higher level of personalization in banking?
Well, as I mentioned, sort of 40 years ago and still today, although the channels of engagement with the customer have proliferated, the level of consideration and the time frame of the relationship in banking is very, very different to retail and e-commerce. And there's really not a discretionary component to how we manage our financial lives. In retail, we're talking about matching millions of people to tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands in Amazon cases of products, many of which they can decide or not to buy almost on a whim.
Right.
And incrementing the shopping basket one notch, comprises personalization to a certain extent. But in banking, we're really thinking about creating the best relationships that last almost a lifetime and go through many waves of someone's financial life. And so the structure of that relationship is very different. The value of the now is very different. The understanding of when is the right moment is as critical, and in fact, even more critical in banking than it is in retail, because there's this much less discretionary nature, much more consideration to making step function changes in accounts and planning and so on.
Well, it's interesting because when you talk about personalization in banking, you talk about the right time, the right place, the right product, and the right channel. What's interesting about that is all those elements, certainly in the financial service area, are very fluid. What I need at a certain time is different than what I need later. At the same time, the environment around us continues to change. So what is prompting my need for that product? Maybe it's the marketplace conditions changes. And even more importantly, the way I want to communicate with my financial institution is going to differ based on what you're trying to sell me. I may want to go into a branch. I may want to use my phone. I may want to get on a computer. I may want to do all three in my consideration phase. This is where I think where AI really plays an amazing role, because it really does somewhat fine tune the sophistication of personalization to the degree that helps you do what no human could do by themselves. We mentioned it. And when you reference the ability to get things done that were not previously humanly possible, what role does AI play today in the ability to build what I'll call sophisticated personalization?
The key to all of this, Jim, is to think about the real scale of a contextual interaction. You talked about the channels. You talked about different messages landing and being more appropriate, and timeliness mattering in different channels, and a preference that customers may have for particularly how they're notified and communicated with. If you have 20 elements of customer or account profile, channel, and creative that you want to explore the outcome of, people think that means you have to test 20 things. You actually have to test 2 to the power of 20 things.
It's a whole lot different.
To actually explore that space properly. And if you're running quarterly campaigns and designing A/B tests, you can do that on tens of dimensions. You certainly can't do it on 2 to the power of 20. To give you an idea of the scale of that number, the length of the universe in seconds is 2 to the power of 18 approximately. So if you could do one experiment per second, it would take you longer than the length of the universe today to do it. So truly personalizing experiences really requires this very high dimensional exploration. AI and machine learning algorithms have really been designed to distill vast bodies of information at the scale at which now our human brains can, and with a computational power that matches that representation capability. And so you truly can get through the analytics and pass through some of these bottlenecks if you put a few of the key underlying pieces into play that can enable it.
So one of our previous guests on the podcast was Raja Rajamanir, the marketing director of MasterCard, that wrote the book Quantum Marketing. And it talks about in the book all these amazing technologies that are out there today that weren't out there 5 years ago. I talk about the fact that if you went to school for a marketing degree 5 years ago, yes, you still need everything you learned, but I'll almost say 2 to the 20 degree of complexity since then. On the other hand, though, the ability for organizations such as Curinos to provide composable solutions to make it so the personalization element of marketing is simplified and accessible by more levels of financial institutions, more level of assets of financial institutions is amazing. Can you discuss a little bit about your Emplero platform and how this makes the marketer's job easier?
Yeah, so the key to it is with marketing technology, one size really doesn't fit all. And particularly, we sort of talked already about the distinction between retail and e-commerce and banking. The key to what we've built with Amplero is it is highly focused on financial institutions and the use cases they experience. So, we've tried to make key use cases for retail banks out of the box, cross-sell, helping core checking customers move into term deposit and loan products, onboarding and driving engagement and breadth of channel engagement, really finding paths to primacy for new or dormant checking customers, and including driving digital engagement, direct deposit, and those things that lead on a path to primacy. And then deposit retention and optimization, which, as you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast here, has just been so critical over the last 18 to 24 months with rapid changes in interest rates and bubbles. And even as interest rates perhaps begin to come down as we move late into this year and into next year, how term deposits should play into high yield savings where there will be a variable interest rate over time and improved margins. Those sort of use cases we've been able to package up very specifically for retail banks. And the other piece of this has been that we've built some key capabilities that solve the bottlenecks I called out. The first is really around putting together analytics and experimentation at scale. And the experimentation capability we've built with Amplero uses an advanced AI capability called reinforcement learning that allows us to adapt over time as experiments progress. So we continue to drill down on the earliest signals about which audience should be addressed over what channel, which elements of a value proposition for a particular product or offering or behavior that you're trying to achieve really actually have an effect. And having that closed loop of feedback where we can drill down into things that work over time solves that very high dimensional optimization problem. The second piece of it from a technical perspective is being able to manage the challenges around proliferating creative, particularly when you're in an omni-channel setting, and how you do that in a way that still honors your regulatory review and compliance processes, but allows you to drill down again on which elements of the value proposition are working, which graphical and layout components of my creative are really driving impact and engagement, and how do I proliferate new creative that actually emphasizes those areas. Well, we've been able to bring generative AI into the loop here, where we still have a review and approval process of creative as if anyone else in your team generated that content, but are able to generate content that emphasizes the elements that our reinforcement learning is discovering are resonating with a particular type of customer.
So am I safe to assume that the Amplero platform is somewhat composable? In other words, if I have a challenge with deposits, I can utilize this platform to do a better job over time, building relationships and dealing with my deposit issues. Is that correct?
Yes, if you have deposit issues, we have an out-of-the-box set of data enrichments and a simple set of plug-in data requirements that we then can operationalize very quickly to create the right dimensions of customer targeting and the right dimensions of measurement of impact and outcome to improve deposit retention and marginal deposits.
So then also, on the other hand, if I was to say I'd like to have this personalization engine driving all of my communications, the benefit to me is because you work with many different financial institutions, because it's financial institution specific, you've answered about 80% of my questions up front and are putting this into the implementation, allowing me to personalize it on that 20% that really is different between my bank and the credit union down the street, correct?
Yes, very true. And, many banks have done a great job of distilling their own unique value proposition and being able to emphasize that. That's a key component. The general data support and targeting dimensions that you need to understand what works and what doesn't work, and to appropriately refine and determine eligible audience. All of those things are out of the box onto which you can layer your brand identity, your unique value propositions, and then quickly get into optimizing that highly personalized set of customer engagement.
So, what is the differentiation between the Implero system and, let's say, an offering of a typical AI model platform from another institution? What differentiates what you're doing at Curinos with what's being done elsewhere in the personalization field?
Um, Really good question. I would say a few things that are sort of key in this area. One, um, rule-based customer journeys are very attractive when you think about your first one, and certainly when you think about having 10 customer journeys. Really, thousands of customer journeys are playing out over time. Think about just an onboarding experience. The
Yeah.
sequence in which a customer beyond initially opening the account, perhaps receiving and activating their debit card and funding the account, where they go next across the portfolio of features and functions of that product, if it's very significantly by individual and their needs for that account. And really, you get beyond that structure. Again, you get beyond what's humanly possible in terms of being able to say, okay, well, if the customer does this and they engage with this set of features, then the right way to add value to our relationship right now is this next sequence of actions. It's very hard to determine and construct human rules for them. We've been able to get beyond that rule-based management of the and optimization of the personalized experience. Part two of that is we're uniquely able to manage and measure outcomes and take the learnings from those outcomes to what I would consider to be downstream KPIs. We can really begin to drive towards customer value. So, for example, you talked about the deposit retention use case, and I mentioned that this transition from term deposits to high yield savings is going to be very interesting transition as interest rates come down. Well, if you're able to optimize for a downstream of value objective, which is margin on deposits, then you can orchestrate between retaining customer deposits, but at a favorable interest rate that still makes sense for the customer. So our ability to measure marketing outcomes, not just to vanity metrics like did the customer click the email, did they hit the banner in the online banking experience, down to, over the next 45 to 60 days, how did that marketing interaction play out in terms of deposit margin and expected future deposit margin? That's a big difference in the
Oh, yeah.
really the
Right.
purpose of the personalization. And you can't achieve good downstream outcome if you're not achieving mutually beneficial relationship with the customer, which is back again to this original banking relationship we had 40 years ago.
Well, it's interesting because I know the team at Curinos, they sometimes ask the uncomfortable questions among their meetings with clients where they're saying, yeah, we saw this initial response, but let's look at it over time. Was the offer too strong where there's actually attrition in a post environment and downstream in the engagement? And they also apply the learnings that they've seen from other financial institutions towards making their program better. It's very much like the crowdsourcing that's done for a GPS system that you use in your car. So what are some successes you've seen with your Implero platform with some of your clients?
Um, I think about this in a sort of few key areas. Um, Firstly, we really see this. We see a change in engagement, of course, from our customers. Often with Amplero, we double just the basic rate of engagement with marketing messaging.
Which is so important because we talk about experience like it's something we can measure like a satisfaction metric. But at the end of the day, what we really want is for our clients to be engaged with, because the more often they're engaged with us, the less likely they're going to try an alternative provider. But the less active they are, the less times they click the button or engage and have interaction with us, the more likely it is they're going to tap someplace else. So that's a major
Yes,
metric there.
that's like the first part, which is, although engagement is a vanity metric, if you don't have engagement, exercising your channels for personalization just isn't working, and you're not
Right.
going to get the downstream outcomes. The cool thing is the impact we've been able to have on downstream outcomes through conversion and product adoption and cross sell, and all the way down to CLV. We have clients achieving 8 to 10x return on investment with Amplero that's been playing out and sustained
Wow.
over multiple years and quarters at this point, not just transiently. And if you think about most personalization solutions, because they're inspired by sort of the retail environment, they're very much focused on transactional outcomes. And if you think about recent historical mistakes in the industry, there's been a very high focus on opening accounts and acquiring accounts, which isn't the same as acquiring a customer.
Right.
And it's been proven to be completely disconnected at times with acquiring a real customer of high quality and you're nurturing a relationship over time. So that ability that we've had to sustain ROI with the technology with our banks over quarters and multiple years at this point is really unique in the industry, I believe.
Well, it's interesting too, because tell me if I'm mistaken on this, that your platform allows organizations to market by the moment. So as opposed to saying we're going to do an equity credit program in the spring, or we're going to do a car loan program in the fall, we're doing daily, every second, every moment, impact to consumers based on what we see in the marketplace and what we see in their transactions. So it's really you're no longer going program by program. It's just a process that goes from beginning of the year to the end of the year with higher results because you're actually hitting them at the right time, right place, right channel, correct?
Yes. And when you're able to optimize for a business outcome like customer lifetime value, right, you can think about that across all the dimensions of the portfolio of products that the bank has. Deposit products, loan products, fee and adjustments, and those sort of things that come into the overall value of the relationship. And it allows you then, through the lens of a common downstream metric like that, to truly arbitrate across many different types of program, right? Identifying that moment when a customer is in the market for a car, seeing that path over months and even several quarters where, a young customer is preparing for buying their first home. You can see those things happening and detect the right moment to interact. And it's a value-driven decision for you then and the customer. And you can see that value playing out.
So one of the aspects of personalization, and you've talked about the measurement aspect quite a bit, which is an important concept, is that the inputs and outputs. In other words, we start with this many people we're going to contact, we get this kind of results. It tells us this about the customer. How do you deploy the results as well as the assets you use in a democratized way at a financial institution? In other words, with your best clients, do the results of your programs and the success and targeting that's done, is that actually shared across the entire organization so that everybody sees what's going on as opposed to just the AI or the data department?
Yeah, it's very much, it often for us, our relationship starts with the marketer when it comes to Amplero, but our relationships at the banks for Curinos, really span almost every major function in the bank. And it's been very interesting as we've sort of helped transition, particularly with the value-based personalization measurement or KPI, we've really begun to be taken into talking to the finance team, talking to the treasury group, talking to the different product teams, where they're really beginning to think about this connection between the product dimensions and their appeal, their benefit to the portfolio, whether that's loan or deposit portfolio, the overall impact to the financials of the bank. It's typical historically for marketing and particularly marketing technology to be viewed as a bit of a sunk cost activity. Yeah. You kind of feel like you should be doing it, but we talked about sort of the bottlenecks, make it very hard to measure and act in a way that truly feels personalized, and even harder to measure financial and even fiscal benefit to the bank. We've been bringing that to bear, and that's what's brought us into that broader set of discussions, even through the lens of our marketing technology offering with Amplero.
So you talk about the bottlenecks, and I'm a marketer by trade, worked in bank marketing from the banker's perspective for 15 years of my career and helped marketers for the next 20 years of my career. So basically, I've either been a marketer or been helping marketing the majority of what I've done in the banking world. But when you talk about bottlenecks, number one, there's always a personnel issue, but bigger than that now, because a lot of this stuff can be delivered from an outside organization, the ability to maintain a content library that allows for the speed and scale of distribution. How do banks do that? Because at the end of the day, I need to talk to the right person, right time with the right message, which means differentiation among different consumers. But I got to do it quickly, immediately. How do financial institutions that you work with build that content library?
That is a critical piece, Jim. And we found that, and through our study too, that it's common for banks to think about these things as big bangs that need to happen of campaign development and creative development, and you're trying to cover all dimensions in one effort. It becomes monolithic. You can't cover all the dimensions because, as you point out, things are changing so quickly. You want to make changes quickly. We found that an emphasis on rapid iteration is really key. And the power of this, irrespective of whether you're one of our clients or not, is to leverage some key technology developments. One, when it comes to creative, is really being able to leverage dynamic templates for messaging. We often encounter our bank's marketing teams. They have static messaging, essentially static templates, but it's really one template, one message. And that keeps you trapped in this. If you want to respond quickly to a trend, you have to literally develop a new message template, literally develop a new creative. If you leverage dynamic templating, our best clients with Amplero have less than 5 dynamic templates in play. Usually we start them with 1 or 2. And what we focus on is, well, within this template, what are the pieces that can be modified? What are the pieces that can be dynamically inserted in? Different subject line content, different graphics, different layouts, different formatting. And those things can be modified programmatically.
Right.
And if you think about sort of going from batch and blast, the actual campaign pieces to the always on pieces, you can be always on. And when you're adding, I can add 10 subject lines in the next 30 minutes, and they can flow into the testing in that dynamic template at any time once they've been reviewed and approved, and then can be launched very quickly. Same with graphics. I don't have to generate all of my graphics for the campaign for this quarter in one go. I can start saying, okay, well, these first few messages I've developed, these are the graphic components that are working. Now let me develop 5 new graphic elements here that play to the value proposition. So this, using the technology that exists, the dynamic templates, and having a view to rapid iteration, which is sort of changing the day-to-day of how a marketer might think when they wake up. Okay, today I might actually do a portfolio of things. I might work on a few bits of copy. I might work on a few bits of creative. I'm not hitting a big milestone, but I'm going to continue to augment and iterate much more dynamically than in the past.
So, it's interesting because when you're working with financial institutions, we tend, in almost everything we do, to get in our own way. You're coming at Curinos with a lot of experience. You have a lot of financial institutions you work with, which you talked about at the beginning of the podcast. Therefore, you have a lot of examples of what works and what doesn't. How often do your clients' marketing team, or whoever your contact people are, sometimes get in their own way and overthink the process to the point of negatively impacting the ability for speed and scale? So, I remember a client I had back in the day of direct marketing where we spent 5 months talking about the visual on the outside of the envelope, when at the end of the day, that had so much less to do with what the results were going to be than getting that program out there 9 months earlier. So what are some of the challenges you see in being able to deliver at speed and scale in the personalization matrix?
I would say, number one is sort of the perfect is the enemy of the good. In the sense that
huge comment, by the way. We laugh about it, but we can get buried in talk about a bottleneck. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we've certainly seen clients that have spent a year working on creative improvements because they view them as being in market for a very, very long time. Again, sort of embracing this iterative approach is key. The other piece, of course, is how you manage the relationship with regulatory and risk. And in that area, I think there are a few sort of philosophical things that you can think about that help unshackle the ability to move. And the first is sort of from the start, which we sort of have 100% compliance with this with our clients for Amplero, is we eliminate regulated data from consideration for personalization at the beginning, except for to the extent that it affects eligibility. And we then encourage a mode of thinking that separates eligibility from targeting. And the notion that once you've defined everyone who is eligible, they will at some period of time in an always-on dynamic messaging setting, they will receive a message about that proposition. How you talk to them, when you talk to them, and over what channel is the thing that will become refined.
Yeah.
But essentially, you're separating eligibility and the compliance components there from what it means to target and truly personalize. And then the third part of that is if you've moved your thinking to think about feedback signals, right? We talked about iteration. I've done so much work in startups and product development. I found the other thing can happen. Again, perfect is the enemy of the good. You can spend lots of time iterating, but you're just within your own microcosm. The best person to give you feedback is the customer. And if you have a compliant communication that meets the right eligibility requirements, the best person who's going to tell you about whether that resonates is the customer. And if you have a mode of closed loop feedback and experimentation, you can learn very, very quickly about where should your bigger efforts go, where should your bigger bang efforts as you're iterating really go, and they'll keep you on the right side of creepy when it comes to personalized interaction.
Okay, so I'm gonna do a make-believe moment here and say, okay, you're now going to move from where you are sitting there on the West Coast, and I'm going to put you in charge of a mid-sized financial institution that basically has data, but they haven't really developed a mature marketing program. You're now in charge of marketing and product for the whole organization. What is the first thing you're going to do to build a strong, personalized communication process? Where do you start?
We need to talk about the customer. I would say 9 times out of 10, we encounter a focus on accounts, not a focus on customers. The customers are the ones who make the decisions, and the customers are the one who have the needs that we're trying to meet with products, including accounts. I think first consideration is how can we think about the customer, because they're the one we're interacting with and they're who makes decisions, and a frame of reference there. Secondly, for marketers, do I have accessible analytics, data that I can get to and really start understanding my customer base before I have elaborate and sophisticated technologies? Do I have accessible analytics and a reasonable understanding for marketers of how I engage with my customers? I think there's a real opportunity there actually with sort of what we might call conversational analytics solutions in the future, where you don't have to be able to code in SQL and those sorts of understand databases to really get access to meaningful data and insights that can help you craft the first dimensions of a good set of campaigns and really think about the portfolio of considerations for the customer. The third, I would say, is can we do experiments? If we can't do experiments, even rudimentary ones, we really won't be able to get feedback on what we're doing and we can't get going. So what is the most straightforward way I can begin to do experiments? Can I just design simple holdout groups where I can differentiate and understand the incrementality of my efforts compared with doing nothing or compared with doing what I usually do, my business as usual? Then you can start pushing increasing levels of sophistication. But I would say those 3 dimensions are key. 1, beginning to think about the customer. 2, access to analytics to really understand them through a lens that the marketers can see. And then 3, finding ways to do experiments.
I'm going to add one more because you probably wouldn't have said it because you're sitting where you are today. And I'm going to say, going to the free agency, I will use a sports analogy, go to the free agency market immediately and find a partner that can play with you and bring you as much of what you just said you needed as you can. So pick a Curinos or pick another provider that's going to say, I've gone down this road already with several clients, not just one or two. I'm going to bring you all the insights I've learned, and I'm going to make it so, Olly, you're going to have this position 5 months from now, because I'm going to bring you success from the low-hanging fruit that I can do immediately to build some market presence and to build an ROI that satisfies the finance department that says, by the way, marketing is not a cost center, it's a revenue center. And the better we do with our data, the more we hit the marketplace for what we have, the better it is. But I would say, and it doesn't matter how big the organization is, it doesn't make any sense to do it alone when you can get the culmination of experiences that a third-party solution provider can give you immediately, no matter if you're Chase or if you're ABC Bank and with 2 branches. The reality is leverage what's already been found, especially as things are changing so fast. Otherwise, you're never going to catch up, because why go down why do we use GPS systems? Because it's easier to use everybody's information who's driving ahead of me than it is to use just my information, what I'm seeing on the road today. So finally, Olly, there's a lot going on in generative AI. There's a lot of talk about digital twins. There's a lot that's really being discussed as it relates to personalization, better communication, open banking. You can go down customer-centric communication as opposed to product-centric. What excites you about what's going on today in the marketplace, that as you play around in your head and look at everything you've done in the past and say, man, I can play in the sandbox a little longer?
Boy, I would say for me, it's the fact that we're really democratizing the ability to act on knowledge and synthesize data and improve experiences. I view generative AI as an additional tool in the box, but boy, it makes interaction human. And if you think about this relationship that it has between language and concepts, being able to leverage that into the experiences we create and how we work is absolutely fascinating to me. And this ability to synthesize data, recommend action, and then take and learn from that interaction very quickly, just has so much promise in so many different areas.
Well, you're exactly right, and you don't even have to get into this deep legal area that you want to do it to the 100th degree. If I do it to the 50th degree or the 25th degree, I'm gonna blow my customer away by be able to have ongoing interactions where I learn about Jim Roos, if I'm the consumer, and my bank learns more and more about me and stores it in a little compository that is different than your compository. And every time I talk to you, I'm talking to you based on the last conversation we had. And as that builds, we get more and more free with our information and say, you know what? You can make a better decision for me than I can make for myself. I'm going to open up my information in my head and say, this is what I want to achieve. And the ability to do that for every single consumer is right now at our fingertips. It really is there. And I don't think we have to go into the realm of pushing the limits of legal and compliance and all that. There's so much there just for the taking, especially when you look at outside data and all that. It's just, I hate to look back and say that we've let go of this opportunity the way we did letting go of all transaction data on purchases when we gave up as bankers the little pin pads that we thought were so stupid out there. And now the retailers and the Amazons and the Googles of the world have all this data that I sure would like back again, but we still have a lot to work with. Olly, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. It's really exciting to see how Curinos is expanding the ability to take all the insights they have about products. I mean, talk about an organization that's moved from product to consumer-centric and has always built these product solutions with a customer in mind, but now it's really doubling down on the ability to personalize the communication and to work with your clients to truly bring results almost immediately.
Thank you, Jim. It's been really fun chatting with you today.
Thank you very much. You have a great one.
You too.
Thanks for listening to Banking Transformed, the winner of 3 international awards for podcast excellence. If you enjoyed today's interview, please take some time to show some love in form of a review. Also, Be sure to catch my recent articles on the financial brand and check out the research we're doing for the Digital Banking Report. This has been a production of Evergreen Podcast. A special thank you to our senior producer, Leah Haslage, audio engineer, Chris Fafalius, and video producer, Will Pritz. I'm your host, Jim Roos. Until next time, remember, now more than ever, financial institutions must personalize experiences to create a better overall value proposition for the consumer.